Back from the future of 1,000 years away, the Time Force Megazord arrived in the year 2001 to be our 9th season Megazord. This is really the Plex and Bandai designers showing off in a way, but given the series theme, they must have felt some pressure to show how this one could be seen as something futuristic and unfamiliar from the pantheon of Megazords that came before it. The result is a very ambitious toy, fondly remembered for how unique it was. But we won't let them off the hook for a few daft decisions they made along the way. Let's talk toy history. So Mirai Sentai Timeranger was Toei's way of marking the new millennium in style. We had to wait a year longer for it to turn into our Power Rangers Time Force, which was basically a carbon copy storyline wise, but I think we can all agree it was worth waiting for, as it gave us characters which are still referenced as top tier to this day. The Rangers Megazord was released first in 2000 as DX Time Robo before getting its Power Rangers adaptation in 2001. Weirdly, Timeranger did not sell particularly strongly in Japan, actually holding the record for worst selling series for 15 years until Ninja, what would become our Ninja Steel, took the mantle. I guess other than the SWAT Megazord in SPD, which was like a secondary Megazord, that explains why the default Megazord jet theme has never been done again. I wonder how well it did in America, but then again I guess Power Rangers trying to pitch plain Zords during Christmas 2001 might not have set quite the right tone for the time period Time Force found itself in. Back then, the UK was oddly still running a year behind America for Power Rangers toys. We wouldn't get Time Force until 2002, and as Wild Force started to enter the fray in 2003, I found that they were being sold off really cheap, which is when I got mine at the start of that year. I'd obviously had such a good time collecting the Lightspeed Rescue Zords, which I'd managed to get 2 years use out of, and then suddenly I wanted more again. And for the first two Megazords, I actually managed to bag the combined Shadow Force set from America back when the pound was strong and the dollar was weak, shipping was cheap, and there weren't import charges. Truly a beautiful time. I think it cost me the equivalent of less than half the retail price of one of them, so it was like getting more than one of them for free. We'll of course be covering the other half of this set next time. I guess though that while the series struck a chord with older viewers, kids just didn't gel with it. Maybe it was the story, maybe it was the Zords. Indulge me for a minute, because quite topical for the current moment is that both Timeranger and Time Force emerged as byproducts of the pop culture moment the Matrix was having. Don't believe me? Well, if all the leather and sunglasses didn't give it away, look at all the interesting camera work that's in the intro, and especially Time Force's opening two-parter. There's a lot of, for Power Rangers, unusual swooping, spinning shots of the Rangers in both their civilian and morphed form. Look at their first Megazord fight in episode 3. Jen literally downloads the data of how to control the Megazord, a la Trinity downloading data how to fly the helicopter. Then during Mode Blue's Megazord fight, there's a full-on allusion to bullet time where time freezes and the camera pans around like the entire city. In the Matrix, the unplugged humans discovered that they're living around 200 years in the future, or so they think, and by entering their technological portal they're able to get back into their version of 1999, taking whatever equipment and weapons they need with them. I think that's very similar to this, where 4 Time Force cadets from the year 3000 go back into 2001, frequently getting their supplies from the future, most commonly the Zords, the Time Flyers, which are sent back in time episodically. So yeah, that's my Matrix argument. Let me know if you spotted anything else. Time travel, of course, gets messy quick. But I always wanted to question why Time Force, the organisation, in the future, can't just send the same Megazord back to the same battle multiple times. It's no big deal for them in the future, they've probably got a written record of everything that happens in the past anyway. Yeah, okay, time paradoxes or other such excuses, but it's for this reason that I don't think it's impossible to be able to show both Megazords at the same time, either in their individual and combined flyer modes, or in their red and blue Megazord modes. And here it's actually possible, because I would go on to buy a cheap second-hand one on eBay years later. Let's move on to the design. Well, the 5 Time Flyers definitely seem to be a homage to the Jetbirds of the 1991 Sentai Jetman, a season that never appeared as Power Rangers and the last and oldest DVD released by Shout Factory, where 5 jets could combine into a larger jet and become a robot warrior. Where Time Force developed the idea was by giving it a secondary Megazord mode. This of course hadn't been done before, and to this day seems almost impossible. Obviously the bird element is gone, as Time Force emphasises more the jet element, sort of an extension to the Stratoforce Megazord jets. The Megazord, well, we've never had one like it. Sleek and covered in grey, silver, chrome and die-cast, they gave us what our millennium brains thought of whenever someone said to think of the future. The problem comes in the execution, in that not all pieces look great. It's definitely one where I always felt the show suit was sleeker and the toy version less accurate to it. The series also started to rely more on CGI for the Zord transformation sequences, which means replicating it myself for this feels basically impossible when they cheated for the actual show. The differences from the original, well, in the great pantheon of changes that were made over the years by Bandai America, this one comes off exceedingly well. But maybe not quite as well as the last original Megazord that preceded it. You remember how one-to-one the Omega Megazord was, as Time Force Megazord returned to giving us just a few compromises. All in all, it's probably about 95% similar. There are two changes I've noticed though. There's the material change of the landing gear, which went from die-cast to plastic for the wheels. Weirdly, I'm kind of okay with that one though. The grey plastic is probably less distracting than something shiny. The thing that is rather a shame is something that I do wish had been a bit shinier though, and it's a return to our favourite theme, the stickers. The chest sticker on Mode Red was so much better in Japan. It had a kind of holographic tunnel effect like on the show that the saber emerges from. Ours is kind of shiny silver, but there's definitely no hologram effect. And it's altogether so silver that it actually overpowers the green underneath, which is mostly what you see on the show. I'm pretty sure as well that this was weirdly one of the stickers that was pre-placed by Bandai America. When you bought the toy, you didn't have to apply it yourself, but fortunately now I've got two of them, I can have a look at what's underneath. Okay, much better. Lightspeed Rescue, I'd say, had gone really big with stickers. Some of them were already applied, like the giant numbers on the rail rescues. Time Force, however, starts the gradual removal of them. What's bad then? So there are unfortunately quite a few gripes that I have with this thing. Some are new and are the byproduct of multiple decades of use. Others though have been bad from the beginning. Like the proportions of Megazord Mode Blue really expressed to me that it was the least priority to get right. You've got these giant arms which keep going up and up, but shrink into tiny forearms at the bottom, and skinny legs which require clipping together because that clip was needed in the combined flyer mode earlier on. It's a shame and means there's less posability in the legs. Over on Mode Red, the visor reveal is unique and fun, evoking the design, I think, of the team's helmets and kind of a grandfather clock somehow. But the two panels unfortunately don't clip aside, meaning you'll usually knock one half over a bit, which obscures the Megazord's face. Proportions, I'd say, are a bit of a running theme here because of what they had to do, concealed arms and legs galore, but also being able to reduce down a bit. I was glad these Zords felt bigger after how small the Lightspeed Rescue Zord seemed. But I was quite disheartened to find that despite the decent sizes of each Time Flyer, that doesn't necessarily carry through into a tall Megazord, and height-wise it's on par with Lightspeed Megazord once again. Here's something that was very cool at the time. Each Time Flyer has an individual cockpit for a mini Ranger figure. It's a shame though that Red's doesn't get a chair like the other four, and also that his figure can't sit naturally, like he has to lie in it horizontally. But I guess you don't notice that as a problem until you get the minifigures. Speaking of, that was one big tease, I'd say the first of its kind, to give us cockpits but not have the figures that go with them. There's probably one in between, but I think the next most comparable thing to that was Dino Charge, where the blue and pink Zords had gaps in their mouths for the Dino Chargers to go, but you'd need to buy them separately in order to put them in. And if we're honest here, the biggest upset is the Time Force Megazord Mode Blue doesn't have his weapon, and that it wasn't even released in the Power Rangers toy line at all. Those of you that have already watched my Megazord Madness buys video know that there is technically a way to get hold of it, that it's not going to make financial sense to most people. And I think that's a shame for the legacy of this Megazord, because Mode Blue rarely if ever is seen without the blaster in the show, and yet for the toy he is eternally empty-handed. These are all things that I think should be addressed when, if ever, someone out there, Bandai, Tamashii Nations, Hasbro, decides to redo Time Force Megazord. I can see that's definitely a daunting prospect given how much this thing needs to do the original toy line sales figures, but I think there's enough fans out there now to justify it, probably. Is it worth it though? You kind of can imagine the 1999 Bandai Japan design team kind of pulling their hair out, trying to get this as right as they could. In terms of how it's holding up now, 20 years later, well, the red Zord arm spoke must have worn away a bit because its right arm in both modes has zero ratcheting and might as well be a helicopter blade. On Time Flyer 1's detachable bit, one of the die-cast wings on mine was loose from the start, and more recently one of the clips on that has broken off because of how tight the connection is in shield mode. What's good about it? Time Force Megazord, Mode Red and Mode Blue really feel like very different Megazords. There's a lot of clever tricks involved to make this happen. The Zords enter this sort of uniform mode where they lose their coloured accents and individuality, allowing them to get lost in the transformation, something that we rarely, if ever, see these days. Also, rotating the orientation of each Zord 90 degrees between the two modes certainly helps. Then there's the two helmets being so different and that they use completely different weapons. The design is one of the things that's really good here because it neatly sells the idea of this thing having all these completely different combinations. Looking back on it now, it is such a fantastically crafted trick. Most modern Megazords barely look like they combine one way, let alone three. So the fact that there are 4 completely different play modes here even to begin with, in more than 20 subsequent seasons, and I'm including the Super Sentais we've skipped, I don't think that's ever been done again. Here we have one Megazord that was able to express that it was from the future in such a unique way that it is, as far as we know, a toy line that currently represents the last Megazords of all time, not including Hyperforce. I found that so appealing back when these were released. I really convinced myself that I wouldn't need to collect any further seasons after it because I would technically have the final Megazords anyway. That's the kind of nonsense you need to tell yourself when you're 15 and trying to stop buying toys. And it definitely worked for a while because after collecting Time Force, I wouldn't buy another Megazord for about 10 years. In Time Flyer mode, I really like that, much like the Megazords, they give each Zord deploying landing gear, allowing you to push your jets around like cars if you like. In such a complicated toy, this I feel would have been a really easy thing for them to cut aside, but they not only went with it, they gave us tidy places to fold them out of the way. In the show, they don't even have landing gear. We're shown that they basically hover off the ground all the time, so this was included literally just to make them more playable. The 5 flyers follow 3 design patterns, which actually reminds me of the uniformity of the Shogun Zords. The girl Zords are both in one style, the boy Zords are both in another, and of course Red gets his own because he's special and he gets to be the head and the torso. Bring the 5 Time Flyers together and you get their combined jet mode. And are we definitely still calling it a jet because that's also what they call their glider that turns into the blaster. Anyway, if you've not clocked it yet, that's rare and even more strange to have 2 nearly back-to-back Megazords with a combined non-Megazord mode, with the Omega Crawler being the other recent example. Yeah, it's definitely not an annual feature. While they never show this on the series, where they prefer to keep it looking stealthy, you can actually attach the discarded pink and yellow Time Flyer parts to the base to give it wheels, another really nice touch. It does take a bit of a while to work out where the sweet spot is for connecting these, but it stays on really well once you do. When it's Megazord time, the series trained us to treat Mode Blue as the warm-up act, and for it he can sort of kick at the knee, not technically possible, but whatever, robots don't have to follow human being conventions. I also really like the chrome and die-cast chest centerpiece. Finally, we reach Mode Red, where you can flub quite a bit more useful articulation in the arms, and thank you to Transformers and Power Rangers toy reviews for pointing out this one with the legs. Great to kick or pretend to sit. Time Force Megazord really kicks off a year of interesting design choices. Things we've never seen before, and starts to nudge how Zord design evolves. It's kind of weird looking back on it now, 20 years later, that I can confidently say that it still seems pretty futuristic to me. So that's it for now, although we're not even done with Time Force Megazord, as there's 2 additional modes for it once you involve the Time Shadow, so look out for that next time. Guys, what do you think of Time Force Megazord? Is it as good as I think it is, or am I just overhyping our Days of Future Past? Let me know in the comments, and I'll see you next time. Force. Sorry.